Thank you very much, Ralph Samuelson on the shakuhachi flute, Carlo Valte on the oud, and Tomoko Sugawara on the Kugo. I'd like to start by asking Tomoko how this journey along the Silk Road began for you.
I knew this instrument, Kugo, about 15 years ago. Because before that, I'd like to explain this history. It was invented 2000 BC in Mesopotamia, and it died out 1000 years ago in East Asia, and 300 years ago in Islamic countries, and completely died out. And to Japan, this Kugo came. So anyway, it was Kugo spread all over around the Silk Road to Spain, from Spain to Japan, and it came to Japan about around probably 8th century, and that time, and actually this old Kugo survived in Japanese old museum. It's called Shosoin. So Shosoin founded it also 8th century, and there are many instruments, beautiful instruments, and also treasures, because so it belongs, Shosoin belongs to imperial family. Anyway, then there is a 2 old Kugo in Shosoin. So there are 2 Kugo in Shosoin. So I knew that instrument. So anyway, it's harp, it's kind of harp. So I'm harpist, and I studied concert harp, and also I play Irish harp. So I'm so impressed. I was so impressed about this harp. So I started to study, research this instrument.
When the music is this old, I mean most of it, there were no recordings, and I'm guessing for the most part there is no sheet music. How do you research a sound? How as musicians what do you look to for guidance of how to play?
I think there's depending on what tradition you're talking about, there's even though there are a lot of manuscript texts from depending how far back you're talking about, at least in the 11th century and earlier, instrumental definitely during the 11th century and onward in Spain. There's a lot of different manuscripts, and definitely in the Middle East and Far East. The whole dilemma about not having a recording is, I mean, as musicians, use your own intuition and everything, but beyond that, there's also an oral tradition that's passed down. And then also there are places, for example, where you can see that the tradition hasn't changed much over many years. For example, in Spain, during the court of Alfonso de Reyes, you'll see iconography and sculptures and pictures of an oud with a pipe and tabor, bagpipes, sometimes some instruments similar to this, VL singers, and different types of frame drums all playing together. And then if you go into the Berber Mountains, for example, in Morocco, you'll still see the same configuration of instruments with their own music, and actually sometimes you see the same melodies. And so as far as what did it sound like, well, we know the materials they wrote about how the instruments were built, and they're still this is built the same way for, thousands of years, actually. I mean, they're, with some different specifications, specs are a little different because of the materials, but the quality of the sound is the same, so you start from there. And then a lot of these things are passed on, and if you look at some of the traditions that still are alive, that use the same instruments with the same sounds, and you put that together with, I guess, your musical intuition and the manuscripts, then you have a reconstruction you can begin with, and then you have a different way to play it with different musicians. So if I play this with someone else, or Ralph did, or Tomoko did, I imagine it would be different too, but still there's something that's the same because of the overall sonic quality.
Can I ask a question?
Yes.
Is that okay?
Yes.
The Tang Dynasty pieces that you did in the beginning had such a kind of staid, courtly tempo. In Pickens' anthology that you took the melodies from, were there any tempo indications? Or do you feel the freedom to, for example, if you felt like playing them fast, would you want to do that? I'm just curious because they all had that kind of
Right.
staid, courtly tempo to them, and just wondering about that. So was the anthology like a ham anthology where it just kind of had the melody and then
There was no tempo indication.
there was no tempo
right?
indication?
So
Interesting.
Yeah, so these pieces, there's no tempo indication, but there's a progression of tempo.
Mhm.
And when this music from Tang Dynasty came to Japan, that progression was even more embedded in the system. And so typically, music moves through slow, meaning fast, which in Japanese is called Joha-kyu. And that was true in Tang Dynasty China as well, but we don't know the
So China didn't really take as much record of it as Japan took from China and then began to record.
Well, also actually the Chinese, there are more Chinese manuscripts of the ancient Chinese music in Japan than there are
And why is
China.
that? you suppose?
Because the Japanese love to preserve things.
I'm half Chinese myself, and there's always this interesting thing between China and
Yeah,
Japan.
the Japanese really are very good at preserving it. I mean, she described these Kugo, which had disappeared so long ago from Japan, but they're still.
Shosoin preserve many things. So one of them is Tang Dynasty's piece too. So already I heard in China manuscript already disappeared. But Shosoin had.
If I can just ask one little other question. So the Kugo started in Mesopotamia,
Yes.
disappeared, came back, went to Spain, and then back to Japan?
No, it started 2000 BC and spread to Japan, to China.
To China first, okay. And then from
Iran,
China,
Persia, and
China. China, Persia, Spain, and then to Japan.
Both ways,
Okay, okay.
two-way.
wherever there was trading, yeah.
You know, I mean, if you can imagine, just people going along this route for like almost 2,000 years, trading things, and there must have been lots of different kinds of musicians. I mean, even like this vertical notched bamboo flute, you find this kind of flute, everywhere from Turkey through China and Japan and so on. So people going along this road with instruments and goods and meeting each other, and they must have been sitting down, and we think this is the first time these three instruments have played together, but probably not.
Do you know if there's something similar to this kind of flute in Spain, or were you really making a...
Oh, I don't think there's
Kind of
any
a modern
flute.
beat now.
There's no flute like this in Spain.
Well, there is in China, the Chow.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, this is
XIO.
Chinese.
Yeah,
comes
it's
from
original.
China.
But I saw many miniature picture and several picture showed this similar ensemble. Flute is like this. This I saw like this shape. So,
Mhm, sure.
so I don't know. lead instrument like I don't know. I couldn't see detail, but it, quite similar. And also, first piece, Kokonor, it came from Kutcha, West China. And it used to be folk dance music. So came to China, and it became Chinese Tang Dynasty's court music. So maybe tempo might change it. And go to Japan, and of course, change the tempo again.
So this flute worked its way from sort of a folk common music, up to courtly music. Is that the direction? Like this, or this Kugo? It's like it's relatively easy to carry. It's not like these giant harps, we sometimes see that play this just sort of heavenly, pretty dainty music. This really seems like it's made to travel and entertain people after work.
Has that feel, doesn't it?
Yeah, and that sound too, compared to the regular harp that we hear.
Sometimes we see the picture, or some woman is riding the camel, and playing this instrument.
You should try it sometime.
Next show, we'll have live camel. Any other question?
Yeah, can I ask also, maybe this kind of ensemble has indeed played together 500 years ago also, but basically the Silk Road is a very long road, and let's say the oud and the shakuhachi are basically from the opposite ends, and the eras are quite different. So you actually, Ralph, already mentioned that you have issues with the tuning and whether the scales and so on are different. Did you have to work a lot to?
Oh, yeah. I don't think it's a matter of the scales. It's simply that these are instruments that easily fall out of tune.
Yeah.
The strings, the strings probably get lower as you play them.
Yeah, actually,
generally.
depending on how they're wound, some get lower, some get higher.
Some get lower, some get higher. They easily fall out of tune as the temperature changes, as they're hit more. The flute, made out of natural material, bamboo, typically gets higher as you play it. So and actually one of the things we were talking about as we were preparing for this is, in that era, Tang Dynasty China and even earlier, how much do people care about what we today call being in tune? And of course, we have no way of really knowing that. But there might have been some more flexibility in years, or maybe just a different way of hearing.
Just a little other questions, like, shakuhachi wasn't obviously a gagaku instrument.
It was, actually.
Was it?
Yes.
Yeah.
Just like Kugo. When the court orchestra came from Tang China to Japan, there was shakuhachi with it, there was Kugo with it. This died out like immediately. This went on till about 1100, and it was a very Chinesey type flute. It had 6 holes, and there are these gagaku shakuhachis in the Shoso-in, and they're tuned to like a Chinese scale, but it's a flute of this form. Then it died out, and several hundred years later reappeared indigenously in Japan as this instrument of wandering Buddhist monks.
So like the tori that you played, which had this, the shakuhachi was really imitating the bird.
Yes.
So would that have been played with the shakuhachi originally, or with the real
it might well have. There's no way of knowing. I don't know.
Just sounded like it was made for shakuhachi.
Yeah, well, I tried to make it sound like bird.
But I'm always thinking the balance. So that time, of course, there is no amplifier. So I chose good balance instrument. So I think it's quite good ensemble. Maybe I can, maybe in time period, it's possible.
Yes.
Is that particular instrument, did you have that made, copying an old one, or
Yes,
are they made now? Are they commercially available, or do you have to make it yourself, have it made yourself?
Yes, it's, I designed, I collaborated with music archaeologist, harp expert, and so we designed it, and I ordered to the harp maker. He's an excellent Renaissance harp maker. So we talked about, discussed, and he made this.
Must have been so happy.
Are those metal strings on the Kugo, metal strings?
No.
It has a brighter sound than I would imagine.
They're gut strings.
Your gut strings, it has a very bright sound.
Yeah.
Yeah, you must think of it.
Yes.
It's tuned diatonically.
Yes,